Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 881 for July 19th, 2021. Coming up in a few minutes.
It takes up a lot of our time. It would be easier just to sell it and forget about it. But, at the end of the day, I think we come from a family business with a hotel, and we are a family business now, and we plan on doing this we plan on distilling and selling our own product for a hell of a long time. So, we want to maintain the good consumers and, Simon says, reduce the false demand. And
you want to look after the guys who will be there and interested. In 20 years, even if whiskey's not a good investment or not a good side hustle, you want to make sure you're looking after those guys now.
4 years ago this month, brothers Phil and Simon Thompson filled the first barrel of whiskey at their new distillery in Dornoch, Scotland. It is something they had dreamed of for several years while running the family's Dornoch Castle Hotel and its world-class whiskey bar. And they're putting some of the lessons they've learned from that experience into the way they market the independent bottlings they're selling while their whiskey matures. I'll talk with Simon and Phil on WhiskyCast In-Depth. We'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Your Voice, and on Behind the Label.
If you look at the entire history of bourbon, I think Dad, you could probably count 20 people, and Dad would surely be one of those people on the most influential list, and he never looked at himself that way.
The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hey, Gabriel Cardarella here from Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey. I'm excited to share with you that Dewar's is the most awarded blended Scotch whiskey in the world, and that's worth raising a glass to. So grab a bottle today and enjoy this week's episode of WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Small batch. How would you describe it? It's like an Irishman's understanding of baseball. Extremely limited.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. As I'm recording this episode, England is relaxing all of its COVID-19 lockdown rules, even as UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Chancellor Rishi Sunak are now self-isolating as close contacts of Health Secretary Sajid Javid, who tested positive for the coronavirus Saturday. Scotland is easing some restrictions, with hopes of relaxing most restrictions by August 9th. Wales and Northern Ireland are easing some restrictions as well. Elsewhere, Australia's two largest states are in lockdown once again after another COVID outbreak that spread from Sydney to Melbourne. And there's talk that foreign visitors will not be allowed to enter Australia until sometime in 2022. In Ireland, foreign visitors are welcome as of today, but unvaccinated travelers will have to show proof of a negative test and still quarantine for 5 days. And Canadian officials are hinting that the border with the United States might be open to non-essential travel sometime next month, as that country's vaccination rates outpace those of the U.S. What does all of this mean for whiskey lovers? Well, it could allow for more travel to visit distilleries and for more whiskey festivals to take place as scheduled later this fall. While many have been already scheduled for U.S. cities, I know of several major events outside the U.S. that are still tentative at best. They are waiting to see what their national and regional governments will allow before announcing firm plans. One of the things that changed during the pandemic has been increased availability of direct-to-consumer shipping for whiskeys and other spirits in the U.S. Before the pandemic, only 9 states and the District of Columbia allowed distillers to ship directly to consumers. To be fair, 4 of those states, Pennsylvania, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming, only allowed in-state distilleries to ship whiskeys. California and 6 other states have temporarily given distillers permission to ship or deliver spirits in-state during the pandemic, but that permission has already expired in New York and Montana. California's temporary approval expires at the end of this year unless state lawmakers extend it. This week, the Distilled Spirits Council released a new survey of more than 2,000 consumers showing strong support for changing state laws to allow more direct shipping. Christine Locascio is the council's public policy director. She told reporters this week that the pandemic has shown demand for expanding online shopping options.
Consumers, as we know, myself included, we're all shopping in different ways, and like the convenience of being able to order products online, including distilled spirits. And that doesn't mean that's going to completely replace how you shop. I think many people still go to their stores and their liquor stores, et cetera, to buy their products. But at times you like the convenience of being able to order it. And it gives you access to new products. So I think, just continuing to make that case that this is something that consumers are demanding, which this survey has shown. And also, reflection of the growing craft distiller presence across the United States, and ensuring that craft distillers and distillers across the U.S. Of all sizes, are able to reach their customers in a more convenient way.
Virginia is the only state that has changed from temporarily approving in-state shipments from distillers to consumers to making that change permanent. The 10 states and D.C. that allow it now, well, that compares to 46 states and D.C. that allow wineries to ship directly to consumers. Let's go through some of the new whiskeys unveiled this week. We'll start with The Last Drop. Master blender Colin Scott hinted on our Happy Hour live webcast several months ago that he was working on a very special blend for his first release since joining The Last Drop. It is out now, the 50-year-old signature blended scotch, and it's only the second time Colin Scott has created a blend that old. Only 500 bottles will be available worldwide. The U.S. recommended retail price, $4,250 each. Colin Morikawa won the Open Championship this weekend at Royal St. George's, along with the Claret Jug. There's no word on whether he'll be sipping the latest release from the Open's official whiskey from the jug. Loch Lomond released the Lee Westwood Single Cask 25-year-old single malt scotch just in time for the Open. The 25-year-old cask was picked to reflect Westwood's 25 European Tour wins. It's available in the UK for a recommended retail price of £385 a bottle. That's $532 and change at current exchange rates. London's Bimber Distillery has added 8 new countries to its country collection releases for this year. Canada, Israel, Japan, South Africa, Switzerland, Nigeria, Austria, and Bulgaria will each get their own single cask bottlings this year, along with the 12 countries from last year's batch. 14 bottlings are on the way now. The remaining 10 will be coming later this year. England's Oxford Artisan Distillery has released its second batch of Oxford Rye whiskey. This one is a throwback, using a so-called ancient grain style. Maslin is a mix of 70% rye, 20% wheat grown in the same field, along with 10% malted barley. Only 973 bottles will be available in the UK at £95 a bottle. And the distillery's third batch will come out at the end of this month. It's matured in ex-Moscatel de Setúbal wine casks. There is no word yet on pricing for that one. Meanwhile, Teeling Whiskey Company in Dublin has released the latest edition in its Vintage Reserve collection. It's a 32-year-old Irish single malt. Right now, it's only available at the distillery's shop, along with the Celtic Whiskey Shop in Dublin and a handful of other Irish retailers. It'll eventually reach markets in Europe and Asia. The price tag, €2,000 apiece. In Canada, 40 Creek's master blender, Bill Ashburn, is also an expert at blending something else. He's also a world-class dog breeder, and his latest whiskey carries the name of his kennel, Foxheart is 40 Creek Canadian whiskey blended with a bit of 12-year-old Caribbean rum. Right now, it's only available in Ontario, but will reach other Canadian provinces in the coming months. It'll sell for around $45 Canadian a bottle. Bourbon Hall of Fame master distiller Jim Rutledge is about to release a new whiskey from his J.W. Rutledge Distillery Company, and it's not a bourbon. It's a rye whiskey. High Plains Rye is a blend of 5 straight rye whiskeys sourced from 4 different states: Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and New York, each one with its own unique mash bill and yeast strain. It'll be available in 24 U.S. states later this month, with a recommended retail price of $54.95 a bottle. A couple of months ago, the first batch of Catoctin Creek's Ragnarok Rye, produced in collaboration with the band Gwar, sold out almost immediately. Batch number 2 goes on sale today through Catoctin Creek's online shop only. In other news, I shared my tasting notes a couple of weeks ago for Whistle Pig's Beyond Bonded bourbon and rye whiskies. Now there appears to be a difference of opinion between Whistle Pig and federal regulators. I say appears to be because Whistle Pig has not responded to my emails since it started the hashtag #FreeBeyondBourbon social media campaign. Whistle Pig's website claims the TTB decided to rescind its label approvals for both whiskeys because they were bottled at 50.5% ABV, and the regulations for bottled in bond whiskeys specify a 50% ABV bottling strength, with no wiggle room. At least one Beyond Bonded label approval shows up on the TTB website as surrendered, but it was replaced with a new one issued on June 21st. Once again, Whistle Pig has not responded to my emails asking for more details, and the TTB has a policy against discussing its actions with specific licensees. We've talked a lot about shipping delays worldwide caused by demand for consumer goods caused by the pandemic. But the BBC reports a cargo ship left Scotland Friday with precious cargo, an entire distillery on board. Rothes-based Forsyths built all of the components for China's Mengtai Group. We reported on this project when it was first announced in 2019. It's destined for Inner Mongolia and will become the region's first whiskey distillery when it opens in the coming months, after it's been assembled. By the time Angel's Envy unveils the new Visitors Center at its downtown Louisville distillery, here's hoping the pandemic will be in our rearview mirrors. Construction is already underway on the $8.2 million project, which will include the facilities to host conferences and private events, along with some things Angel's Envy co-founder Wes Henderson has been wanting since the distillery opened in 2016. He joined us Friday night on the Happy Hour Live webcast.
More tasting rooms, more bars, more event space. I've got a place where I can entertain folks when they come in, which is really cool. My own little space, Mark, where if you come in or we have folks from the media who come in, we've got a place to work together, and expanded retail space also. It just feels right. It's amazing space.
The new Visitors Center is expected to open next spring, but the distillery is remaining open to the public during construction. Finally, with people starting to travel in the U.S. again, how would you like to be able to spend the night at a distillery? Okay, no one is setting up Airbnb options for their still house, but for those who travel in an RV or camper, Harvest Hosts is offering to connect them with distilleries and breweries that offer free overnight RV parking. The service has been around for a year or so. It also offers overnight RV spots at golf courses, museums, farms, and other attractions. Access to the directory starts at $99 a year. Now, tent camping is not an option, as Molly Edgington of Harvest Hosts explains.
It has to be self-contained so that you're not using bathrooms, hookups, nothing else is needed. You are able to stop at any host location that is within our portfolio. Super easy. We have kind of a VRBO, Airbnb type reservation tool that you can use to sign up for the host location, make sure you have your date and time secured. The only thing that we ask of you as a member, outside of behaving, is to try to bring back income revenue to the host location as a thank you for staying overnight. So we encourage our members to spend at least $20 at each of the host locations, whether that is at a distillery, doing a tasting, buying a bottle of whiskey, whatever they might be selling, just to further support these host locations as a thank you for being a part of Harvest Host.
The service is also available in Canada, though that's not an option for those who have to cross the border just yet. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. Don't forget to join us for our Friday night happy hour live webcasts. We get started at 5 p.m. New York time, 10 p.m. London time on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Twitter, and Twitch. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events, brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling. Tickets are still available for the Kentucky Derby Museum's Bourbon Legends Series dinner and tasting with Bradshaw Bourbon's Terry Bradshaw this Thursday night, along with the Fraser History Museum's Bourbon Masters Series event that same night in Louisville. The Black Bourbon Society's Open Door Tour will be in Washington, D.C. this coming weekend, with events on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It finishes up next weekend in Dallas. Distilled Living kicks off a series of online events leading up to the American Distilling Institute Conference in Louisville, with an Exploring Kentucky Tourism and Bourbon Tasting July 28th. McTeers has its next whiskey auction July 30th in Glasgow, Scotland. The Beer, Bourbon, and Barbecue Festival hits Brooklyn, New York, July 31st through August 2nd. And as of now, Whiskey Live in Perth, Australia is still on the schedule for August 20th and 21st. Of course, all in-person events are still subject to change on short notice because of local public health restrictions. Right now, we have 166 different live and in-person events on our searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. The calendar is brought to you by Catoctin Creek Distilling, makers of the Virginia Rye Whiskey. You'll find their Roundstone Rye at fine whiskey shops in 26 U.S. states, 3 continents, and online. Visit the Where to Buy page at catoctincreekdistilling.com to find a retailer near you. Please drink responsibly.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
You know, people always ask me, does Redbreast go better with ice or without? Would it go well with figs, dark chocolate, apple crumble? Is there one particular thing I should enjoy it with? I tell them, yeah. Other people.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Oban and the Classic Malts lineup. Simon and Phil Thompson grew up as whiskey lovers around their family's Dornoch Castle Hotel in the Scottish Highlands. After managing the hotel and its world-class whiskey bar, they opened their own distillery nearby 4 years ago this month, and they've also developed an independent bottling business during that time. In short, they have seen the whiskey world from a lot of different angles, and not all of what they've seen has made them happy. For instance, they've seen the impact of flipping whiskeys as investments, not just as whiskey makers, but when they try to get their hands on those whiskeys for their hotel bar. Phil and Simon Thompson sat down at a shared laptop the other day to talk with me via Zoom. And since they shared the laptop's mic, you'll hear some background noise and occasional audio glitches during our conversation. So, what have you guys learned over the last 4 years?
Well, patience.
Yeah, patience. Yeah, I mean, maybe we came at it with it. There was a degree of naivety involved. Yeah, lessons learned. Well, there's been many lessons because effectively, we'd made some whiskey before legally, small scale experiments, but making whiskey is just one small part of the overall deal. There, there's all the business side. You've got staffing. There's so much to it, and you've got limited cash flow in theory until you're releasing whiskey at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So a lot of lessons learned. I think I used to listen to quite a few brewing podcasts, and quite often they would have professional brewers in, and what they would often say to home brewers who took it really seriously and were thinking about a change of profession, to go from being whatever, lawyer by day, brewer by night, to full-time brewer, you would say, well, if you want to make beer for a living, then brew for someone else. If you don't want to make beer for a living, then own a brewery, because you'll just have to employ someone to do all the fun stuff for you.
Yeah.
So
in the first few years with us, we did
everything.
But we had a good team as well, a good core of people with us.
But have you guys balanced that with running the hotel still?
We're not really involved at all in it. We help with some of the picks for the bar and help source the bottles and give nice bottles. But we have to kind of walk through the hotel now with blinkers on and try and be oblivious to things that normally we'd go and deal with. We just have to, because I think probably some of the past 12 months have probably been our hardest.
Yeah, we've got managers in the hotel now that basically do what we used to do. There was quite a while when we were running the hotel at the same time as running the distillery, so it's like it
was hard.
Yeah, got the scruffs on during the day at the distillery, and then the white shirt on at night in the hotel. And the only thing we really do now, except for a bit of kind of overview and strategy, which is again more of our appearance field, we basically manage the stock for the bar to an extent. So behind us is kind of like part of the basically the bar stockpile that we kind of build up to make sure we've always got juicy bottles for the future. So that's all we really have to do with it nowadays. We just make sure the bar's good, make sure the pricing's right, and make sure there's really good bottles available.
Yeah, it's really 100% of our time is fully in the distillery really these days.
How did you manage to get the council to let you build a distillery as part of a listed castle that's been around for a long time?
Yeah, well, the building that we primarily used, that was Dornoch Castle Fire Station. So that had been sitting unused for, essentially it's been used for junk storage since the 1960s when the fire service moved out into the new building. 60s?
Yeah, 60s, yeah.
So there's kind of like it sits...
It's actually on the boundary, isn't it?
It's
not the same grade of listed building.
Yeah, the building we're in, it actually sits just outside of the Dornoch Conservation Area. So literally the walls of the distillery is the border of the conservation area. So the physical building sits just out of it. It literally covers 2 of its walls. Is just out of the conservation area. So we managed to get away with that. We managed to get away with some warehousing hidden in behind another building. That got us so far, and then we've bought another site further up.
Was it 2-3 years ago? 2 years ago we bought it.
Yeah, I've got another site in town that we now use for additional warehousing, and we run our whole independent bottling operation out of there. So we do the maturation, we do bottling. We can kind of control everything from there, so it's not done under contract as it was in the first couple of years.
You mentioned the independent bottling business, and it seems like that's where a lot of your energy is being spent as well right now while your own whiskey matures, right?
Yeah, I think we're probably... we were accidental independent labellers, and now we've become accidental independent bottlers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of something that started when we first crowdfunded. We had a bit of spare money, and we actually bought our first cask from Ian Crucier, who's got North Star Spirits. He's a super guy. When he worked at AD Rattree, we bought a cask from them, which was our Invergordon, because we had a bit of spare cash from the crowdfunding. Okay, we don't need to spend this until year 2, so let's invest in a cask, and we turned it over. And we found our importer who was importing our gin to Japan said, "Oh, this is great. Can I have more?" Went, "Oh, right, okay, excellent." So it just kind of perpetuated from there. And then I think probably 2-3 years ago, I looked at how much money we were spending with independent bottling halls in Scotland, and I decided that we should probably bring it in-house. And, it was a good excuse for us to do that. And it's kind of become the main part of our business because we really don't have a lot of our own stock.
Yeah.
So.
We were already bottling all of our own gin in-house, and we needed more space for warehousing our own whiskey anyway. So it just seemed kind of natural to tackle the independent bottling as well. So it gives us far more control. We're also far more reactive. I don't know if there's only a handful of guys who are, they're doing their own warehousing, their own bottling, etc. There's not so many of us, whereas there's lots of us which we're doing it under contract elsewhere. But these guys are getting so busy just now that you're waiting forever to get a sample or to get a space on a bottling line. So it made far more sense to us to do it. I mean, we can.
Oh yeah, we could have a cask arrive and then have it on the website within 2 or 3 days.
If we know it's good to go when it arrives, we can have the cask in, we can have it vatting ready for bottling, and it can be out the door in a couple of days if we wanted to. So whereas if you're an independent bottler, you're waiting forever to get your samples, and you got to make decisions.
And also, I think we can't really afford to work that way. Everything we still function without any debt, so everything that we do. It has to be turned over fairly quickly. We can't sit on 20,000-30,000 pound casks for months and years. It's just it's just not viable for us. But we are getting to a point where we are holding a bit more than we used to.
We're sitting on more and more now. As it's been going better and better, we've been able to start building up a stockpile of casks, a bit like our stockpile bottles for the bar. We've started building our stockpile of casks for future independent bottlings, and we've become a little less hand to mouth with it. That's been going really well. I mean, everything we do sells out super fast. So, I mean, we've
pretty easy philosophy. If we can put good juice out at a fair price
and with a good label,
it kind of ticks all. Certainly for me as a kind of whiskey geek, it kind of ticks all the boxes. The main thing is just trying to make sure the price is right. We kind of mix our distribution as analog and digital. So we go straight to consumer with our website for some stock, but we also try and feed into retail shops and our import partners. I think that's also really important to a long-term strategy for our business. I think we could sell everything directly, but it's the wrong thing to do for our business. I think for us, we want to try and support the retailers, support our importers. Our importers are great. Our retail partners are really fab. So we've got a few ideas in the next, it's another great thing about having everything in-house is we can kind of, if we have an idea, me and Simon can talk about it on a Sunday night, and then we can potentially be implementing it the following week. So we've got some ideas on doing some bottlings for retail partners to try and bring back a bit of the excitement of, being a whiskey consumer and walking into a shop and seeing a bottle that you didn't know they had. So we want to try and maybe work with some retailers to cut out the total hustle that's in whiskey nowadays. So online and everyone's sharing photos and this shop has this and then it gets sold out. So we're trying to work on some kind of some fun things.
Should we call it an offline exclusive?
Exclusives. And
for retail shops, not to be put online, not to be publicised, not to be sold online.
But we've also thought about with a retail exclusive, not just giving it straight to them to sell straight away, but working with the shop to say, look, if we give you 12 bottles or we give you 24 bottles, how about we extend your payment terms, we make your margin bigger for this bottling run, and, say you release 6 in the first week, then you give it a week without doing anything, then you go 2 bottles on the shelf randomly, another 3 bottles on the shelf randomly, so it becomes the consumer walks into the shop and can discover it. So it's not a case of a WhatsApp group sending a message to all of their friends and saying, by the way, this bottle's in this shop, and then it goes instantly. So it means you as a consumer can walk in and have the excitement of finding something that you thought you wouldn't be able to discover in a shop.
Yeah, our last direct sales bottles on our website sold out in 8 minutes and 12 minutes respectively. So now we've switched over all of our direct sales to a kind of weighted ballot system where essentially either we know of people who are entering, or they provide evidence to show that they're opening bottles our stuff, or opening bottles that sell for a lot more at auction. And then we assign a tag to them, which increases their chances. So we've got a whole load of tiers for that.
It's encouraged things like bottle shares. It's encouraged clubs. It's encouraged more bars to contact us directly and say, can I, if I open this bottle, can we get an allocation, or can we get a higher tier? So it's really encouraged a bit of a community. There's lots of bottle shares and sample shares. And
also, a lot of guys got annoyed just because they're just not fast enough. You know, if a bottle sells out in 8 minutes, your website gets laggy. You know, so it saves all of that, and it means everyone's got a chance. And there's a whole lot of stuff involved in order to stop reduce the chances of people doing spam entry and false entries and things like that. So it's very, very CCP, social credit system. Yeah, so heavily based off the Chinese communists there. It seems to be working.
Whiskey socialism that works almost.
Well, sort of. It really well. We thought about this the other day, and the term we heard, which kind of clicked with us, is we're trying to cut out false demand. So we're trying to make sure we look after a core of guys who, if this all goes tits up, and you're just left with your guys who love whiskey, love drinking whiskey, love collecting whiskey, and aren't in it as a short-term flip or as part of their investment folio. So we're making sure we're looking after our core demographic and trying to cut out the false demand, which is the guys looking to make a short-term buck or purely building up as part of their investment folio. So we're trying to reduce our false demand and get our bottles to the right places, clubs, bars, drinkers, collectors. And it's a lot of extra work and costs on our end in order to just, because
it would be easier just to sell it all and forget about it.
Yeah,
somebody else's problem.
We're selling it all fast regardless.
Yeah.
But, we're spending time and money trying to...
Yeah, we do the research in the back of house. We look through emails, we look through forums and auctions and things like that to keep an eye on everything. And it takes up a lot of our time. It would be easier just to sell it, forget about it. But, at the end of the day, I think we come from a family business with a hotel, and we are a family business now, and we plan on doing this we plan on distilling and selling our own product for a hell of a long time. So, we want to maintain the good consumers and, as Simon says, reduce the false demand and,
you want to look after the guys who'll be there and interested. In 20 years, even if whiskey's not a good investment or not a good side hustle, you want to make sure you're looking after those guys now.
Yeah, I think the thing, like I said about the retail exclusives and looking at doing things like this, is the thing that gets it for me, that annoys me now in whiskey, is the hustle, and you just have to be constantly working and hustling just to try and get a bottle that you want to drink with your friends or share with your friends. And it's just really, really annoying. And I find this even with the bar nowadays. It's like, I used to go, phone one of our suppliers and say, oh, hey, can I get the local barley release? Oh, no, sorry, can't do that for you. But then phone everyone else. No, you can't do that. You just don't get it. You can't have it anymore. So you have to kind of hustle to get a bottle. So I had to trade a bottle of like our 31-year-old Isla malt for a bottle of local barley, new local barley, to put in our bar just because I wanted to drink it. It's just like, this hustle was just like kind of weird to me to have to do that. When in fact, we should be the people that the retailers and the wholesalers should be directing their stock towards, because you are going to open it. But a lot of them do. I'd say aroma whiskies and specialty drinks are good like that.
Yeah, they're both good at holding back sexy stock for bars because they know it's going to get drunk. As a business, distillery should be helping to encourage that kind of behaviour as well, because it's a lot better to get your bottle out to a bar where
30 people might drink it,
as opposed to just sit on someone's shelf somewhere doing nothing.
Especially for our perspective, because we don't spend any money on marketing. That's something we just don't do at all. So getting a bunch of guys to share a bottle between them as a sample share, or a bottle going behind a nice bar and getting sold by the measure, is kind of our way of marketing our product and getting our product in front of people. So,
especially with the pandemic and people starting to get back to bars, it really is important to have your stuff behind a bar. How did the pandemic affect you guys in terms of your sales, but also the hotel? Because I'm pretty sure the hotel had to close down for a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The hotel's a completely different game. It was, we came out of a winter where, we had a really great summer season, very seasonal business with the golf course, lots of American tourism in Dornoch. And we came out of, what year would that be? 2019. 2019, a really good year. And then the winter of 2020, we tend to every winter make a lot of investment in the hotel, refurbish rooms.
That was 2019, Phil.
2019. No, it's been all blends into one. But yeah, they made a lot of investment in new rooms, and spent a lot of money in the hotel. Then you come out into March, and all of a sudden you're told to close down for the foreseeable future. No furlough no government grants. You don't know what's going on. Initially, nobody knew what was going on. So it was a real struggle in the hotel. But I mean, they've had a brilliant year. Amazingly, they've had a great year since the distillery. We've had our turnover's up pretty substantially, and we've worked probably the hardest we've ever worked in our lives.
Yeah, we've
had a really great year.
Yeah, we dropped very early on in the pandemic. We switched the whole place over to sanitizer production. So we're one of the first off the mark in the UK to get stuck into that, and then we did a map of all the producers in the UK and tried to a map and database that we shared out, and then tried to meet up supply and demand. Well, that was all in short supply, which is actually the one I made. Then I sent to the guys at the American Distillers Institute. So then they made an American version of that, which eventually they kind of turned into a global version. And then the French gentleman,
French
drinks journalist, did one as well for France, which he then also turned into, based on our one, which he then turned into kind of a global one as well. So we tried to help with the sort of global supply and demand matching up there in the early days, because it was all the little guys getting stuck in because we could move quickly while we were waiting on the big guys to really get ramped up. And then once they got ramped up, then we just kind of backed off
and just went back to normal production, really.
Yeah, so we lost a few months' production there, and
everything's been pretty. I mean, all of our import partners everything's been pretty strong. I think with the type of product that we're selling, small batch or single cask bottlings, fairly limited quantities going to each market. None of our import partners had any problem selling it, or the retailers were still online and selling it. We were selling it direct to the consumer. So, we didn't really feel the pandemic, I think, in the same way as a lot of other distilleries did, who were perhaps more reliant on travel retail and more reliant on the on-trade.
Well, we're not officially open to the public, so we don't make any money from tours or anything like that. So I know, especially some of the newer distillers, they've got that kind of heavy set into their business plan that that a good chunk of the production is going to be paid for from kind of tours and shop sales. So you're seeing a couple of those distilleries having to put a lot of casks out onto the brokerage market at the moment, when I'm sure they'd much rather not do that, because they were expecting they're expecting the income from visitors and direct shop sales. So I guess that's not too bad for us, because I think we're going to try and pick up a few more casks from some of these distilleries for kind of long-term sits.
We've been fine, really.
Yeah, we've been all right. And working, because we've got the office, we've got the warehouses, we've got another warehousing and bottling site, we've got the distillery. You could kind of split up between multiple locations and minimise your mixing. There's a bit of working from home as well for the office days. So I mean, we were lucky that we could just keep busy and keep on moving.
I think we're also lucky from a personal perspective in the area that we live in. It's fairly rural. There's plenty of nice big long walks, and you can drive 10 miles in the middle of nowhere, and you're away from it all. So certainly the pandemic was pretty rough on a lot of people, especially people who lived in cities. Good friends of mine who had kids during the pandemic, and kids that never saw another kids until they were 18 months old. It's just, it's really tough for a lot of people. So we're very fortunate, and we're just kind of thankful that we managed to come through it pretty unscathed. And even the hotel as well, it was tough, but they've had a great.
Yeah, we did a little crowdfunding thing with them before all the furlough and grants and such were clear. So that helped keep them afloat. So a lot of existing customers, a lot of our customers basically got vouchers. It was
20% markup.
Yeah. Basically, you buy $10 voucher from them, and you get $12 spending power down the line. So that's good for us, because it kind of spreads it out over. A lot of it was done by overseas guys, so it kind of spreads out the fulfillment over a couple of years, or like 3 or 4 years on them. I can't remember which. So that was good. That kind of kept them afloat during the kind of darkest days. So thank you everyone who helped us out there.
Tell me about this COVID relief bottle that you did for donation to the folks in India to help out there.
Yeah, sure. I'll let you lead on. I'm going to get some of that Tam Dew. Do you want some?
No, I haven't actually touched the old bottle there. Yeah, well, like I said, we hadn't really intended on doing any other official releases, at least maybe not something until late this year, maybe. But yeah, I was starting not to work, and the situation in India was looking particularly hairy, and I was getting quite concerned about it. We've got friends of Indian descent as well, and it's things from their relations over there were sounding really awful. And it kind of had a bit of a feel of if it got much more out of control, it could really be kind of a cascading collapse type affair. So I was getting pretty concerned, and I was getting worked up in the car on the way into work, and then got into work and told Phil what I wanted to do, and we kind of knocked it back and forth for 5 minutes, and then just did it. Just started getting rolling with it.
I think we had pretty much about the same time we were doing a bottling. Well, we did 2 back-to-back bottlings with the London Whisky Club. One of their, I think is he a treasurer of the club? He seems to do a lot of the work within the club. He, a couple of his family friends died in India, and I was on the phone to him, and he was telling me this, and I was at the same time that Simon was kind of getting very concerned, and we sort of all came to the conclusion we should really do something. So between us and the London Whisky Club, did some internal silent auctions for some of their bottles. So they did a bimber, they raised a lot of money internally, and I think overall between us and the London Whisky Club and the donation from the commission from Whisky Auctioneer, I think we ended up with like 25 grand or something.
We did 25 just from our bottles, and then we did 2 separate releases where we did a £10 donation
per bottle.
Which we didn't add on to the price of the bottle. We reduced our margin and then put £10 from each bottle from 2 single cask independent bottlings into the pot there as well. So I think in total, we're like just under 25 or 25, give or take.
I think the London Whisky Club were near on 12 or 10 or 12.
Yeah, and then they raised another 10 or 12. So it was just quite a quick turnaround. We thought it'd be something we could do quickly. Phil wouldn't let me do a whole cask, and he was probably glad he didn't. So, but all in all, we managed to raise a good chunk of money, and we did that super fast and from start to finish.
Me and Vary were labelling because we were trying to get it into Whisky Auctioneer. And Vary and I were what works with us. We were labelling the bottles in HMRC
in our bottling hall.
Definitely
meant to be done.
Definitely not where it wasn't meant to be done.
Yeah, but we may or may not have to go and meet the post in order to get the deadline.
We definitely stretched ourselves to make sure that we could get to Whisky Auctioneer to get out.
Am I gathering that you kind of stretched the bounds of legalities with this one a little bit too, just to get everything done? Or when I hear HMRC mentioned here, I'm just kind of curious because
no, not at all, Mark.
No, but it all got done. And it all got done super fast. So.
Very efficient. We were very efficient about it. It was the right thing to do. Our label printers came through with it as well. I phoned them and said, "Look, I need this. I need this in 2 or 3 days." And
Katie had the label design done super fast. She had a really nice kind of peacock design. We've got peacocks over here, which were introduced from India. So we thought that would be a good connection.
But it was really good. It was the right thing to do at the right time. I'm glad we did that.
Yeah. And it's always easier to ask forgiveness than permission for a good cause, right?
Yeah. We didn't do anything wrong.
We didn't do anything wrong.
Of course not.
No. But so that's all going well. Distillery's keeping us busy. So the production's looking really nice there as well.
Running out of space again.
Yeah. Just put a deposit down on another bit of land for some more distillery stuff. We're always running out of space. I mean,
is that a hot off the press WhiskyCast exclusive, Simon?
Is it?
I think so.
I guess so. But we're doing some more expansion down the line. So
I'm sure you're aware of the size of our distillery and how it's a bit of a pig to run, and how it would be nice to. Yeah, basically. So it'd be nice. We're casually thinking about expansion, expanding production. We're nothing crazy. We'd still be micro by distilling.
We'd still be in like the bottom 10 by output capacity, rather than being like the bottom 1 or 2.
But we really are desperate for space. I mean, whether we expand the distillery or not, we need space. We're desperate for space.
We're getting tight on warehousing again. As the independent, when we bought our current warehouse and got it already, we weren't anticipating quite the scaling up of the independent bottling side of things. So, we always need more space.
I think we did. The past couple of weeks have probably been some of the most demanding with bottling we've ever had. But it's been, it's all driven. Our importers are great, and if anything, we're having to turn down more people than we'd like to. We turn down import partners, and I don't want to say where, but we've turned down quite a lot.
Well, there's only so many ways you can split a single cask, and you don't want to be.
You don't want to start diluting it too much.
You don't want to take away from your good customers to give to your new customers. So probably going to have to look at doing. I mean, we only do a little bit into the US through K&L Wines. So we're probably going to have to look to do a little bit more like what we do with the US, where it's kind of market exclusives rather than holding a bit of everything.
That's good. We do a lot of that in Japan and Taiwan. It bulks up. The other thing is from our perspective, market kind of bulks up a pallet. So if we do one single cask for Germany, a single cask, and then we add in like 12 or 18 bottles of all of our other stuff, it fills a pallet. Whereas if we don't do that exclusive, you've got a half pallet and your importer says, I'll just wait another 6 months and then we fill the pallet, then you have a mixed pallet. So we have to kind of work that way because we just don't have the space to store it.
We do all our consolidation in-house, so it gets pretty tight while we're waiting for...
We just put in new cask racking when it's actually being used. The front rows are being used for pallets of stock because we just don't have the room to put them anywhere else. So it's getting a bit crazy. We definitely need, the idea of a big open space for warehousing and distribution and consolidation would be amazing.
I notice when listening to you guys that you seem to finish each other's thoughts all the time. What happens when the two of you disagree?
Oh, don't worry. We have plenty of days like that. So
we spend a long time in the bottling hall together, don't we?
Yeah, we spend a long time in the bottling hall listening to WhiskyCast. To be honest,
yeah, it's a bit of a revelation for us, Mark. I never really used to. I'm not really big. I am a big podcast person, but I use it to listen to when I go to sleep. So I tend not to pay a lot of attention to it. So the more boring podcasts are better. I get a bit of tinnitus, so I play podcasts. It really helps me kind of sleep. But then in the bottling hall, we're like, okay, we put podcasts on and we started listening to WhiskyCast. And we've been kind of just keeping up to date with stuff. Yeah. And what I really enjoy is the whiskey news. And it's something that I kind of like, we used to pay a lot of attention to what was going on in the industry. Yeah. And I think certainly through places like ScotchWhisky.com and Whisky Intelligence, when I used to have time, I'd be on them and I'd be seeing what was going on. But then we just don't have time in our lives anymore. So like sitting down and hearing about what's been going on in the world of whiskey that I otherwise wouldn't have sitting down.
Well, it's more that because we can listen, we can work away. Yeah, we can use our hands at the same time and keep up to date. And the interviews are really good as well. So I used to listen quite a lot many years ago, but
because of it, we the other week when you were interviewing the guys from Glengarry, Alistair, and
Quanelli.
Really, yeah, we were me and Simon. We looked at each other and we were like, right, we need to, because we met Alistair years and years ago when we visited Ardmore. We were okay. We need to email him because we need to go and look at some of their tech they're putting into Glengarry. So now, because of listening to WhiskyCast, we're now going down to see the guys in the next couple of weeks. Because otherwise, I just I haven't spoken to Alistair in 6 years, 7 years, something like that. So yeah, it's good.
Time flies. For sure. But yeah, so we've been enjoying ourselves in the bottling hall with your fine podcast. So thank you very much for that. We've even been going back in time and doing old episodes from years ago.
From when you interviewed Ginger Willie.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for doing this and joining the archive. I mean, it's been something like 10 years since I've seen you guys. It seems like it.
Oh my!
It's been a while.
I think this is probably less sweary than our first podcast.
I think so, yeah, because you guys were at the bar.
My recollection was being very, very busy and trying to do a podcast from pouring pints and pouring glasses of whiskey for probably Inverhouse tour or something like that.
I think so, yeah. By the way, if you'd like to listen to that 2014 interview I did with Phil and Simon Thompson at the Dornoch Castle Hotel bar, we have the entire unedited interview available at the WhiskyCast website. Just check the archives for November of 2014. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Oban. Every sip of Oban is like a postcard. Oban Single Malt Scotch Whisky is offering the chance to immerse yourself in Oban and the whiskey-making process through the Oban Abode experience. 2 winners will receive a trip to Scotland to stay in the Oban Abode, just steps from the distillery. To learn more and enter, visit obanabode.obanwhiskey.com. Complete rules are available at the website. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. Let's start off with the 2021 Old Forester Birthday Bourbon, which made its debut earlier this month. It comes from 119 barrels filled back on April 16, 2009, and it's bottled at 52% ABV. The nose has notes of baked apples, cinnamon, a hint of black pepper, fresh berries, vanilla, and a touch of pecan pie. The taste starts out with caramel candy and berries, followed by a peppery spiciness with just a hint of chocolate. The finish is long and dry with a good balance of pepperiness, chocolate, oak, and a slightly herbal character in the background. As always, it's an excellent whiskey. I'm scoring the Old Forester Birthday Bourbon a 93. I mentioned Jim Rutledge's latest whiskey during the news, but he has also just come out with the latest bourbon for Blue Run Spirits. I received a sample of this 14-year-old bourbon the other day. It's bottled at 56.5% ABV. The nose has notes of butterscotch and caramel candy, complemented by a touch of oak tannins, along with brown sugar and dried flowers. The palate, thick and chewy, with a good balance of spices, oak, caramel, butterscotch, and brown sugar, while the finish is long and well-balanced with a gentle touch of lingering spices. I'm scoring the Blue Run 14-year-old bourbon a 94. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey. They're reviving the tradition of Maryland-style rye at their Baltimore farm and waterfront distillery. Their tequila cask-finished rye just received a gold medal in the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. It's rye whiskey finished in extra añejo tequila barrels, displaying notes of agave and vanilla, dried figs, and honey. In-person tastings are available once again at the distillery in Baltimore, but you'll also find a variety of virtual tours, tastings, and other experiences at the Sagamore Spirit website. They're offering WhiskyCast listeners a free virtual guided tasting. Purchase bottles from your local retailer, and a Sagamore Spirit teammate will guide you through each one. Visit sagamorespirit.com and use the code WhiskyCast, all one word, to access. Please drink responsibly. The latest release in Diageo's Orphan Barrel range is Copper Tongue. It's a 16-year-old bourbon distilled at Cascade Hollow Distillery in Tullahoma. The nose is nutty and sweet with a hint of almond roca candy, along with caramel, vanilla, orange marmalade, dried flowers, and a subtle hint of maple that comes out over time. The taste is fruity with orange marmalade and a hint of peaches, sandalwood, cedar, almonds, and a hint of chocolate. The finish, long and sweet with a touch of soft oak. I'm scoring Orphan Barrel's Copper Tongue Bourbon a 93. Last month, we reported that Westland Distillery was replacing its 3 original core American single malts, American Oak, Sherry, and Peated, with an all-new flagship Westland American single malt. I received a sample the other day. It's bottled at 46% ABV, uses 6 different types of barley, 5 different cask types, and gets the most out of all of those variables. The nose is aromatic and warm, with a gentle kiss of smoke, plums, fig cookies, hints of baking spices, and toasted raisin bread. The taste is well-rounded and complex with a great balance. There are good spicy and smoky notes at the start, followed by dark fruits and hints of maple and cedar that don't overshadow the spices. Touches of barley sugar, raisins, and chocolate add character in the background. The finish, long, complex, and well-rounded, and all I can say is, wow! I'm scoring the Westland American Single Malt a 95. Finally, I mentioned this one on the webcast Friday night when I was drinking it. Was going back through a drawer of old whiskey samples recently and found one that had slipped by me years ago. It was a Barry's Own Selection 1982 Glenlivet 26-year-old single cask, bottled by Barry Brothers and Rudd at least a decade ago, and the sample bottle had been sealed with tape. Good thing, because it is still a great whiskey all these years later. It was bottled at 52.2% ABV. The nose screams of Christmas cake, along with touches of fig cookies, molasses, honey, and oak. The taste is thick and spicy with baking spices, dark fruits, barley sugar, honey, vanilla, and just the right touch of oak. The finish is long and oaky with just a touch of spice. If I had tasted it back then, I might not have enjoyed it as much as I did the other night. I'm scoring the Barry's Own Selection 1982 Glenlivet Cask 4340 a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to the searchable list of nearly 3,200 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
After 175 years, Dewar's has learned it's not all about awards. Staying Curious happened to help us fill that trophy case with more than just our amateur fishing, golf, and bowling trophies. It takes time and commitment to make some of the world's most awarded whiskey, which is why every Dewar's whiskey goes through a secondary resting period for a more balanced blend with extra smoothness. From our first master blender, A.J. Cameron, to our current Stephanie McLeod, we've honed our double aging process to make some of the world's best Scotch whiskies. Dewar's 12-year, for example, was just awarded the double gold at this year's World Spirits competition in San Francisco. And Dewar's 27-year took home Best Blended Scotch Whiskey 16 years or older. No need to take our word for it. Pick up one of these great whiskeys today. Your palate won't be disappointed.
Let's open up the inbox now for your voice. We're testing out an idea for the next few weeks. Until now, we'd always kept the Happy Hour live webcasts separate from each week's podcast, except for the occasional soundbite. But since many of you are starting to return to the office and commuting once again, you may not have as much time to watch the live webcasts on Friday evenings. So this past week, we released a bonus episode with my conversation last week with Dewar's Master Blender Stephanie McLeod. And based on the response so far, I think we've hit on something. At Potstilled Matt on Twitter tweeted this from Dublin, Ireland. Delighted that the Happy Hour Live has made it into the audio format. Loved hearing this conversation with Stephanie McLeod. I hope you decide to upload more of these. At Mike W. Simpson tweeted, thanks so much for including last week's Happy Hour podcast. I never get a chance to catch them due to work. Hope it continues in the future. #Slancha. And from Mike Makarenko on Instagram, great idea. Please continue this. Thanks, Mike. I think we're going to start making it a regular thing each week. Jerry O'Sullivan at Pogues 1977 tweeted a photo of a bottle of J.J. Corey's The Hanson Irish whiskey that he picked up during his trip to Ireland, along with this note for me and Louise McGuane of J.J. Corey. At L. McGuane, thanks for recommending Irish malts. My order arrived today. WhiskyCast, thanks Mark for introducing me to at Whiskey Gate. I'm looking forward to bringing this bottle home to Chicago to share with my friends. Hope you enjoy it, Jerry. Have a safe trip home. And if you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, whether it's a photo, a question, or a suggestion, You can always find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and other things that make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. It has been almost 8 years since the whiskey world lost Lincoln Henderson, one of the great distillers of his time. Lincoln spent 40 years at Brown-Forman and retired in 2004 after being part of the team that created Woodford Reserve, Gentleman Jack, and other great whiskeys. Here's how well-respected Lincoln was in the whiskey industry. When the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame inducted its very first class of legends in 2001, Lincoln was right there alongside folks like Booker Noe, Jimmy Russell, and Parker Beam. After his retirement, he did some consulting work for Suntory and other folks, but it was his son Wes who convinced Lincoln to come out of retirement to create Angel's Envy Bourbon. Their first release came out in 2010, just as the bourbon boom was taking off.
I don't really believe he was ready to retire. He got to the age where companies start kind of retiring you as opposed to you really wanting to retire. And, part of me was kind of like to prove a point, and I don't think Dad, maybe as he got older and closer to before he passed, I don't think Dad ever really understood his place in the history of bourbon, which I think is hugely significant. If you look at the entire history of bourbon, I think Dad, you could probably count 20 people, and Dad would surely be one of those people on the most influential list. And he never looked at himself that way. But towards the end, he really started to feel the love and to see people come out, but he was just as excited or even more excited about passing on that to me and to his grandsons. But that's just the way he was. He was not focused on himself. He was focused on making others happy with his stories and his whiskey and trying to work with us. So we had the same opportunities that he did. So at the end, he really got to see, and I pushed him out there as much as I could, not just because I wanted him be in public. I wanted him to see that appreciation and respect and all those things that everybody had for him. It was very important for me to make sure that he knew that.
Wes joined me Friday night on our Happy Hour Live webcast. You can watch the entire conversation on the WhiskyCast YouTube channel or listen to it later this week on our bonus episode of WhiskyCast. If there is something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copperpot. The tears of Ireland's great writers bursting with flavour, humour and angst. Bottled for you to taste. No writers were harmed in the making of this premium Irish whiskey. Writer's Tears Copperpot.
That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, cocktail recipes, the whiskey photo of the week, and a complete archive of all of our past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
All right, let's talk about our whiskey collections. Dewar's 15-year-old whiskey is a great addition, especially for those of you who like bourbon. Recently honored with a gold medal at the 2021 San Francisco World Spirits Competition, this 15-year-old has the hardware to go toe-to-toe with any bourbon. Find Dewar's 15-year-old online or in a store near you.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2021, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening, and please stay safe.